June 18th, 2020, a press release lands on financial terminals across Europe. It reads like something from a fever dream. Wirecard AG, one of Germany's most celebrated technology companies, has just announced that 1.9 billion euros does not exist. Not missing, not misallocated, not delayed in transit, gone. The company's auditors, Ernst and Young, had spent 3 years asking for confirmation of that money. It was supposed to be sitting in trust accounts in the Philippines, but according to Filipino bank regulators, the accounts never existed at all. The banks had never heard of Wirecard. That morning, the stock collapsed 40% in minutes. By afternoon, 40 years of German financial credibility were burning in real time. And somewhere in Munich, a CEO named Markus Braun was preparing to turn himself into police. How does a company worth 24 billion euros, a company on the DAX 30 index, a company that employed 5,000 people and processed payments for half the internet, simply not exist? That question would take prosecutors, regulators, and journalists months to answer. And the answer was worse than anyone imagined. Wirecard did not begin as a fraud. That is the most important thing to understand. The most dangerous lies are built on something real. The company was founded in Munich in 1999. It started as a payment processor for online gambling and adult entertainment sites, sectors that legitimate banks refused to touch. Wirecard touched them and made money doing it. By the mid-2000s, it had pivoted toward mainstream digital payments. Cards, mobile transactions, e-commerce processing, the kind of infrastructure that moves quietly beneath every online purchase. In 2006, Wirecard acquired a banking license. That changed everything. Now it wasn't just a tech company, it was a regulated financial institution. It could hold customer funds, it could issue cards, it could operate like a bank while marketing itself like a startup. Markus Braun became chief executive in 2002. He was Austrian, soft-spoken, obsessively private. He wore black turtlenecks that journalists immediately compared to Steve Jobs. He spoke about disrupting the global financial system with the quiet conviction of someone who believed every word. And for a while, the numbers seemed to back him up. Wirecard's revenues grew year after year. Its stock price climbed from a few euros to over 180 euros per share by 2018. In September of that year, Wirecard replaced Commerzbank on the DAX 30 index, Germany's flagship stock market, the 30 most important companies in Europe's largest economy. This was not a fringe fintech startup. This was supposedly the future of German finance. The Financial Times, Bloomberg, institutional investors across Europe all treated Wirecard as a genuine success story. SoftBank, the Japanese investment giant, invested 900 million euros in 2019. That investment alone sent Wirecard's share price surging. In total, at its peak, Wirecard was valued at over 24 billion euros. It had a higher market capitalization than Deutsche Bank, Germany's oldest and most storied financial institution. Let that land for a moment. A payment processor, founded to serve online casinos, was worth more than Deutsche Bank. The first person to seriously question Wirecard was not a regulator. It was not an auditor. It was a short seller. In 2015, a research note from a firm called Zatara Research alleged accounting irregularities at Wirecard. The report was detailed. The allegations were specific. Wirecard's response was to call it market manipulation. German financial regulator BaFin launched an investigation not into Wirecard but into the short sellers. The company was shielded by the very institutions designed to scrutinize it. Then came the Financial Times. In January 2019, journalist Dan McCrum published a report based on internal Wirecard documents. The documents suggested that senior executives in Wirecard's Singapore office had engaged in systematic fraud, forging contracts, fabricating revenue, manufacturing customers that did not exist. According to the Financial Times, the documents had been prepared by a whistleblower inside the company. The details were damning, specific, named. Wirecard's response was immediate and aggressive. The company denied everything. It hired a law firm, Raja and Tan, to conduct an independent investigation. It filed criminal complaints against the journalists. BaFin, the German financial regulator, temporarily banned short selling in Wirecard stock. Read that again. The Regulator banned betting against the company, while fraud allegations were live in the press. Wirecard's management appeared before the German parliament. Markus Braun personally assured legislators that the company's accounts were clean. Ernst Young, which had audited Wirecard since 2009, continued to sign off on the company's financials year after year. In April 2019, KPMG was brought in to conduct an independent audit. This was supposed to be the moment of final vindication. Wirecard expected KPMG to clear its name completely. Instead, KPMG spent nearly a year investigating, and in April 2020, it released a report that stopped just short of calling it fraud. KPMG said it could not verify large portions of Wirecard's reported revenues. Key documents had not been provided. Third-party confirmations could not be obtained. KPMG did not say the money was fake, but it couldn't say the money was real. That distinction in corporate finance is everything. The walls were closing, and still the music played. June 18th, 2020. That date appears twice in this story because it is the moment everything collapsed into a single day. Wirecard announced it could not locate 1.9 billion euros. That was supposed to be held in trust accounts at two Philippine banks. BDO Unibank and BPI, two of the Philippines' largest financial institutions, issued statements saying the documents Wirecard had provided, purporting to show those accounts, were fake. The Philippine Central Bank confirmed it had no record of those funds within its system. 1.9 billion euros fabricated on paper for years. Ernst Young, which had audited those accounts annually, had never physically verified them. According to later court documents, EY had relied on confirmation letters from a third-party trustee. That trustee, a company called Citadel Corporate Services, later became central to the investigation. On June 22nd, Markus Braun resigned. Hours later, he was arrested at Munich Airport. He was released on bail of 5 million euros. German prosecutors charged him with market manipulation, fraud, and breach of trust. But Braun was not the most dramatic character in this collapse. That was Jan Marsalek. Marsalek was Wirecard's chief operating officer, an Austrian national with connections so wide and so strange they read like a spy novel. Court documents and investigative reports, including work by the Financial Times and Bellingcat, suggested Marsalek had long-standing ties to Russian intelligence. He had allegedly shared classified documents with Russian operatives. He had traveled to Libya during the Civil War. He had claimed to possess nerve agent antidote. On June 19th, 2020, Marsalek told colleagues he was traveling to the Philippines to clear up the missing money. Instead, he disappeared. Within days, investigators determined he had fled through Belarus. Austrian and German arrest warrants were issued. Interpol issued a red notice. Marsalek was never found. As of the time of this recording, his whereabouts remain unknown. The man at the center of one of Europe's greatest financial frauds vanished in plain sight across international borders. Wirecard filed for insolvency on June 25th, 2020, 4 days after the missing money was announced. It was the largest corporate insolvency in German post-war history. 24 billion euros gone, 5,000 employees out of work. Investors across Europe wiped out, and here is where the story gets even darker, because Marsalek's disappearance wasn't just a fugitive running from prosecutors. According to multiple investigative reports, including detailed work by the Financial Times and Bellingcat, there is credible evidence that Marsalek had been operating as an asset or at minimum a contact of Russian intelligence services for years, possibly while the fraud was ongoing. Did Russian intelligence know about the Wirecard fraud? Did they help protect it? Did Jan Marsalek's connections buy him a clean exit? Prosecutors have alleged, courts have not yet concluded, but the questions don't go away. Stay with us. The aftermath moved fast and in some cases far too slowly. Markus Braun remained in German custody for an extended period before his trial began. The criminal trial against Braun opened in Munich in December 2022. As of 2024, the trial is ongoing. He has denied all charges. Prosecutors allege he was the architect of the fraud, inflating revenues through fake third-party partners to raise the company's value and his own compensation. Oliver Bellenhaus, Wirecard's former Dubai manager, became a key cooperating witness. Court documents revealed he directly admitted to participating in the fraud. His testimony is central to the prosecution's case against Braun. Ernst Young faced enormous scrutiny. In 2022, the Financial Reporting Council, the UK regulator, launched an investigation into EY's audit work for Wirecard. German financial authorities launched parallel investigations. Critics noted that EY had audited Wirecard for over a decade and had never verified the existence of accounts that held nearly one-third of the company's reported assets. EY publicly stated it had been deceived by an elaborate and sophisticated fraud. Industry experts noted that auditors are not required to physically verify every account. They also noted that is precisely the kind of standard that perhaps should be reconsidered. BaFin, Germany's financial regulator, was gutted by the scandal. Its president, Felix Hufeld, resigned in January 2021. A parliamentary inquiry found that BaFin had received multiple warnings about Wirecard and had failed to act appropriately. The inquiry found that BaFin had actually investigated the journalists reporting on Wirecard before it investigated the company itself. German parliament passed new financial oversight legislation in 2021. BaFin received new powers to directly audit and investigate fintech companies. Critics argued the reforms were insufficient. SoftBank lost its entire €900 million investment. Institutional investors across Europe absorbed billions in losses. Retail investors who had bought Wirecard stock based on its DAX 30 inclusion, many of them ordinary Germans, were simply wiped out. The total estimated fraud, according to German prosecutors, involved inflating revenues and profits across multiple financial years. The full scope of falsified accounts extended back years before the collapse. Investigators found evidence of fabricated third-party transactions in markets across Asia and the Middle East. Dan McCrum, the Financial Times journalist who had been investigated by German authorities for reporting the story, was later awarded the Gerald Loeb Award for Distinguished Financial Journalism. His reporting, which Wirecard's lawyers had tried to discredit through criminal complaints, was confirmed in every material detail. Sometimes the truth is just the truth, and it waits. Here's what the Wirecard story actually reveals. It's not about one bad man. It's not even about one corrupt company. It's about a system that had every tool to catch this and chose comfort instead. Auditors signed off. Regulators looked away. Institutional investors bought more stock. A government regulator banned short sellers because short sellers were inconvenient. A company ended up on Germany's flagship stock index without anyone properly verifying that its biggest asset actually existed. The checks existed, the frameworks existed, the rules existed, and they failed completely. Wirecard survived as long as it did, not because the fraud was impossible to detect. The Financial Times detected it. Short sellers detected it. Whistleblowers inside the company detected it. It survived because the institutions surrounding it found it easier to believe than to doubt. There's a word for that in finance. It's called regulatory capture, but there's another word for it too: cowardice. In the end, €1.9 billion was never found. Jan Marsalek was never found. And the question no court has yet fully answered is whether the biggest financial fraud in German history had help from the outside. That question still has no answer. So here is the question for you. Should Ernst Young face criminal charges for its role in the Wirecard collapse? The firm says it was deceived. Critics say 10 years of failed audits is more than deception. It is negligence, or something worse. Leave your answer in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, stories that go behind the headlines and into the actual documents, subscribe to this channel right now.